Why is France chased from Africa? The arrogance of France and its lousy presidents like Hollande and Macron have pushed Africans to wake up and drive out France, which gave nothing in return to the African economy. François Asselineau explained very well how France destroyed its relations with Africa. President Macron like Hollande acted like lackeys of the Rothschilds in Africa instead of representing France. Unveiling France's Arrogance in Africa, a journalistic investigation into the impact of French presidents Hollande and Macron on African economies. The relationship between France and its former African colonies has been a topic of contention for decades. Allegations of exploitation, neo-colonialism, and economic imbalance have long plagued this relationship. In recent years, voices within Africa have grown louder, accusing France and its presidents, particularly François Hollande and Emmanuel Macron, of perpetuating a cycle of dependency and exploitation rather than fostering mutually beneficial partnerships. François Asselineau, a prominent political figure, has shed light on the destructive nature of France's policies in Africa, arguing that the country's leaders have prioritized serving the interests of global financiers like the Rothschild family over the welfare of African nations. Historical context. To understand the complexities of France's relationship with Africa, one must delve into its historical roots. France's colonial expansion in Africa during the 19th and 20th centuries left a profound imprint on the continent, shaping political, economic, and social structures that persist to this day. Despite decolonization movements in the mid-20th century, France maintained strong ties with its former colonies through various agreements and alliances, often exerting significant influence over their economies and politics. François Hollande's présidency. François Hollande, during his tenure as the President of France from 2012 to 2017, faced criticism for perpetuating neo-colonial policies in Africa. His administration's interventionist approach in conflicts such as those in Mali and the Central African Republic raised questions about France's motives and priorities on the continent. Critics argued that Hollande prioritized maintaining French geopolitical influence over promoting African self-determination and development. Emmanuel Macron's presidency. Emmanuel Macron's presidency, which began in 2017, brought hopes of a new era in Franco-African relations. However, his actions in Africa have been met with skepticism and condemnation. Macron's remarks dismissing colonialism as a crime against humanity were seen by some as a superficial gesture lacking genuine accountability for France's colonial past. Furthermore, his administration's policies continued to prioritize French economic interests, often at the expense of African nations' sovereignty and economic independence. The influence of global financiers. François Asselineau's assertions regarding France's subservience to global financiers like the Rothschild family shed light on the intricate web of economic interests shaping Franco-African relations. Asselineau argues that successive French presidents, including Hollande and Macron, have prioritized serving the interests of financial elites over fostering equitable partnerships with African nations. This dynamic, he contends, perpetuates a cycle of dependency and exploitation where African economies remain subjugated to the whims of external actors. African awakening and pushback. In recent years, there has been a noticeable shift in African attitudes towards France's role on the continent. Calls for greater economic autonomy, sovereignty, and accountability have grown louder, fueled by grassroots movements, civil society organizations, and progressive political leaders. African nations are increasingly asserting their agency and pushing back against perceived neo-colonial practices, demanding fairer terms of engagement with France and other external actors. Conclusion. The investigation into France's relationship with Africa under the presidencies of François Hollande and Emmanuel Macron reveals a complex web of historical legacies, economic interests, and power dynamics. Accusations of arrogance, exploitation, and subservience to global financiers underscore the need for a re-evaluation of Franco-African relations. As African nations continue to assert their agency and demand accountability, the onus is on France and its leaders to prioritize equitable partnerships that promote mutual prosperity and respect for African sovereignty.